Well, it was 1999, and I received a phone call from a priest in Chicago, Father Joza Grbić, and he had told me that there was going to be a priest from Croatia, from one of the Croatian islands, coming to his parish in Chicago to do a 3-day mission. And he had asked me if I would come to interpret for this priest. And I didn't know anything about him. I had never heard of him, had not heard any of the events that had happened with him. And I was hesitant to go. I don't really know why, but I kind of said, "Oh, Father Joza, I don't know. Ask somebody else. You have a church full of Croats who speak Croatian a whole lot better than I do. Go ask them." But he called me 3 times, and he was very persistent. And he said, "No, Annie, it has to be you. You have to be the one." And so finally I said, "Okay, I'll come." And I'll never forget, that was October 7th, 8th, and 9th, 1999. And he said to me, "Come to the rectory a little bit early. It was going to be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday." And he said, "Come on Wednesday a little bit early so that you could meet this priest, so that, if there's anything that you need to talk about with him, go over with him before the seminar begins, you can do that." And I had in my mind, I don't know why, that he was 90 years old, that he was old, that, it was going to be maybe a little bit boring. So that was my idea when I came there. That's who I thought I was going to be meeting. Well, when I came to the rectory, there was a whole church full of people, a whole rectory full of people there, but I didn't see anybody who looked like what I thought this priest should look like. And so I was talking to a bunch of people, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I saw this man coming down the stairs. And I kind of looked at him, and my first thought was, oh, this is probably some young guy from the neighborhood who needs a lot of help. It's a good thing that he's here to come to the seminar. Well, a few seconds later, somebody said, "Well, Father, did you get rested?" And I thought, that's Father Sudcu. So I was very surprised when I first met him. He was not at all what I expected, and that was our first meeting. Well, I'd like to tell you that from 2 perspectives. One, my impression of that night, and what happened over the course of the 3 days and afterwards. First of all, I just want to say, up to that point in my life, I had heard a lot of the best speakers in the Catholic world. I'd gone to a lot of conferences in the United States, Catholic conferences, heard some of the best preachers. And so I really heard a lot of very good people. When I heard him speak that night, I heard something that I had never heard in my life before, and it had an unbelievably deep and profound impact on me. And what I heard in him that night, it wasn't a new message. It was the gospel message that you hear all the time. So it wasn't anything new that he said. But what I heard, in fact, I remember to this day exactly, excuse me, I remember exactly what he preached on. I remember the homily almost word for word. But what struck me that night was the authority of Jesus Christ himself in his words. And it was when I was hearing him preach and translating for him, there was a power in his words beyond the actual words themselves. It was, what I saw in him was a man who loved the Lord and who understood that his priesthood was really the priesthood of Jesus Christ, and that was conveyed through every word that he spoke, through his whole being. And that left such a deep impression on me that I to this day, I've never heard anything like it from somebody else. That sense of the power of the priesthood of Jesus Christ through the priest when he's preaching, when he's at Mass. That was what very deeply touched me when I first met him. I can tell you the first night of the seminar, it was 3 days. The first night of the seminar, the church was 2/3 full. People hadn't heard of him. They didn't know anything about him. But everybody went home, and they called all their friends and relatives and said, "You got to come. You got to see this." The next day, the church was really full, packed. The third day, there were people out on the streets. I don't even know where everybody was. It was so packed because people kept going home after each of the nights and telling everybody, there is something very special here. There's something very powerful here. You have to come and hear. Because, it's not a message that you hear with your ears. It was a message that you hear with your heart. And when people are touched at their heart, they want everybody that they know to come and be touched in the same way. After that, I remember I was not the same, probably to this day. It just had such a deep impact on me. And, in the Croatian community in Chicago, and not just the Croatian community, but the wider community, the Catholic community in the United States, the people that were there, people were just buzzing about it. It was kind of like the beginnings of Medjugorje. Everybody was talking about it, and were you there, and how did you feel? And it just, everywhere I went, people were asking me about it and talking about it, and you could feel that something very special happened in those 3 days, and that was the beginning. You know, John Paul II one time said that that we need a new evangelization and that we are in the springtime of the church. And people need to be inspired. People need to be touched. And they're not touched, in my opinion, by mere words. You know, they need something deeper. They want to hear a lived gospel message. They want to hear somebody who loves the Lord, who loves the church, and who challenges them to the truth. And this is, I think, one of the most important things in today's time. We are living in very treacherous times in the church. There's a lot of attack against Catholic morality, against Catholic ethics. We need priests who are not afraid to speak the truth. We need priests who are not afraid to be targets for speaking the truth, because very often today, when somebody speaks the truth, they are targeted. They are targeted because the wider culture doesn't like the message of authentic Catholic moral teachings and ethics. And so I think in today's time, I think we need a couple of things. I think, one, we need somebody who will inspire people to live their faith. We need somebody who will challenge us to live a radical gospel message. But we also need somebody who will stand up to the lies that are being told in our culture and say, this is the truth. This is the truth that we as Catholics need to live. And I think that's one of the things that Father Sudcu does. And, you know, I think there's, we need more priests like that who are willing to put their life on the line for the sake of the church, for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of Jesus Christ, for the sake of people who do not want, you know, I don't think Catholics want a diluted theology. I think Catholics want to know the truth. As hard as it might be sometimes to hear it, I think people want the truth. They don't want watered down faith. And I think we need people who will preach that message. And I think he's one of those people. He's first and foremost, he's a priest. He's a man who loves Jesus Christ with his whole heart, his whole soul, his whole mind, his whole being. He's a man who gives himself to others. He's a man who is not afraid to suffer for the sake of others. He's a man who's willing to speak up to the truth. He's a man who has a beautiful childlike quality that I think we're all called to have, that Jesus calls all of us to have. He's an artist with unbelievable creativity within him. And, you know, when you see some of his pieces, his paintings, his sculptures, his mosaics, the different things that he's painted, they're an expression of his soul, you know, and his pieces of art, his artwork, are homilies in and of themselves. They speak about the depth of this man's soul. And, but he's also very normal, you know. He is a man who has incredibly unique gifts that the Lord has given him, including the marks on his body. But he's also very normal, you know. He knows that those gifts are given to him and that the Lord is using those gifts. But he knows he's a human being, frail and in need of the Lord, in need of the sacraments, just like every other person. He's not pretentious. He's not, he's just a very humble, beautiful soul.